Remember that pink Louisiana wedding, the armadillo groom's cake, and Sally Field screaming in a cemetery while the other women tried not to fall apart? 6 iconic actresses, and a production that nearly broke before it began. Today, we're counting down 20 weird facts you never knew about Steel Magnolias. Number 20. Here is where it all started. And it is not where anyone would guess. That title, the one that sounds like it was carved into a wooden sign above every beauty parlor in the Deep South, was never a Southern expression. Robert Harling did not pull the phrase from regional tradition or folk wisdom. He lifted it from a steel floral paperweight sitting on a neighbor's shelf, a piece he privately described as something beautiful, made of very strong stuff. Harling grafted a private domestic image onto his sister's story and built the entire title around it. It worked completely. The title's apparent folk wisdom quality gave the film an immediate cultural authority it had not yet earned. Audiences assumed they were walking into something that had been part of Southern heritage for generations. They were not. They were walking into something one man invented from a paperweight. Harling never publicly clarified the origin until interviews drew it out over time. By then, the phrase had taken on a life entirely independent of where it came from, which is precisely what he intended. Knowing this changes how that title card lands. It is not a regional archetype. It is a private eulogy for one specific woman, wearing the costume of something much older, and Harling planted other personal fingerprints in the film just as quietly, including one that nobody watching would recognize on first viewing. Number 19. If you have seen Steel Magnolias, you have seen Robert Harling. You just did not know it. Harling wrote himself a single-line cameo as the minister who officiates Shelby's wedding and who later stands at her graveside service. He deliberately chose the one role in the story that would place him at both ceremonies: the marriage of the character based on his sister Susan, and at her burial. He was precise about the terms. Harling asked director Herbert Ross to keep him to one line per scene so he would not pull focus from the actresses. The result is a writer quietly witnessing, on camera, the 2 most significant events in the story he built around his sister's death. Those 2 scenes play very differently once you know who the minister is. The wedding ceremony at St. Augustine Catholic Church in Melrose, Louisiana, becomes a moment where the writer is literally standing at the altar, watching an actress perform his sister's wedding. The graveside service becomes something even more quietly devastating. The man who wrote the words is standing over the fictional grave of the woman whose real grave he had already visited. Harling placed himself there on purpose, not as a Hollywood cameo and not as a joke, but as a brother who needed to be in the room. He embedded other unaltered real-life details with the same quiet conviction, including one that came directly from his sister's actual childhood. Number 18. At one point in the film, MacLaine mentions Shelby twirling batons as a girl. It is a small, warm, throwaway moment of Southern childhood nostalgia, the kind of detail that sounds like local color invented to make a character feel real. It is not invented. Harling's real sister, Susan Harling Robinson, genuinely performed baton routines to the Hawaii 5-0 theme as a child in Natchitoches. The specific detail belongs to a specific person. Harling refused to change it or generalize it into something that felt more broadly Southern. He could have written any song, any childhood habit. He kept Hawaii 5-0 because it was Susan's song, not a song like the one she performed. That one. This choice tells you something important about how the script was built. Harling was not a writer who shaped real events into something slightly more dramatic or slightly more cinematic. He was a writer who kept the identifiable specifics intact because softening them would have been a form of erasure. The script functions, in certain passages, as a verbatim record of someone's life, rather than an adaptation of it. That detail, sitting quietly in a single line of dialogue nobody pays particular attention to, is as personal as anything in the film. And before any of this material reached the screen, the role at the center of that story was already being performed by a very different actress on the other side of the world. Number 17. Julia Roberts as Shelby feels like fate. The performance, the face, the way she moves through the story. It is difficult to imagine the film belonging to anyone else. But while Ray Stark and TriStar Pictures were still in the middle of their Hollywood casting search, a pre-fame Nicole Kidman was already playing Shelby in Sydney. Kidman originated the role of Shelby in the Australian premiere of the play at the Seymour Centre in May 1988. It was one of her earliest professional stage engagements. The global rights to the play were being licensed while the Hollywood casting search remained completely open, which meant Kidman was performing the role in another hemisphere before Roberts had entered the conversation at all. Laura Dern and Winona Ryder were both on the shortlist. Roberts entered consideration after a casting director mentioned her work in Mystic Pizza, a modest film about a pizza delivery driver that most people outside the industry had not yet seen. She was not a known quantity. The role was genuinely undecided. A future two-time Oscar winner was already playing Shelby in Another Hemisphere, while the producers debated whether anyone had heard of Julia Roberts. The role carries a fully documented alternate history, where an entirely different global superstar might have defined Shelby for an entire generation. And the most quoted line in the finished film has an equally surprising backstory, because it did not exist until a panicked actress needed a rescue. Number 16. I'm not crazy, MacLaine. I've just been in a very bad mood for 40 years. If you have ever quoted Steel Magnolias, there is a reasonable chance that is the line. It sounds like Harling spent weeks refining it to that exact pitch. He wrote it in seconds in a backstage corridor because an actress had a problem. During off-Broadway previews at the WPA Theater in New York, original Weezer actress Mary Fogarty came to Harling moments before she was due back on stage and told him she needed a comeback line, something that could stop a scene cold. Harling wrote it on the spot, under pressure, in real time. Fogarty reportedly scrawled it on her palm and went back out. The line was not in any draft of the play. It was never formally added through a revision process. It survived as a piece of emergency writing that Harling recognized was too right to lose, and he kept it in every subsequent version of the story, all the way through to the Hollywood production directed by Herbert Ross. The character's thesis statement, the line that most precisely defines who Weezer Boudreau is as a human being and delivers the film's sharpest laugh, was a backstage rescue job, not a polished piece of craft, a necessity scrawled on skin. Last-minute invention would keep shaping the production long after Harling finished writing, including an outdoor sequence where the very season it was supposed to be was simply impossible to replicate. Number 15. One of the warmest and most atmospheric sequences in Steel Magnolias is Natchitoches Lit for Christmas, the town glowing under holiday lights as the characters move through what reads as a cool December evening. It looks and feels completely authentic. It was filmed in sustained heat above 100 degrees. The actual Natchitoches Christmas Festival takes place in December. The production schedule ran through Louisiana late summer, which meant the cast wore sweaters, ski parkas, wool coats, and winter furs while quietly baking in August heat. Every single cozy winter frame is a complete seasonal illusion, manufactured by a crew working in conditions as far from December as possible. Dolly Parton reportedly turned the situation into a moment of perspective. During one particularly brutal shoot day, she told Julia Roberts that she had spent too many years wanting to be famous to start complaining about the price of getting it. It is a very Dolly Parton thing to say, and it sounds almost exactly like something Truvy Jones would tell a younger woman, which is perhaps not a coincidence. The scheduling constraint forced the entire location unit to build winter out of summer, with no margin for error. What audiences experience as an intimate, warmly lit holiday gathering is a complete seasonal fabrication, and the production built equally convincing illusions inside, including the space where most of the film actually takes place. Number 14. Truvy's salon is the heart of Steel Magnolias. It is where friendships are built and secrets are kept, and the best lines in the film are delivered. It feels like a real small business that has been operating for decades. The kind of room where the furniture has its own history. The exterior of the building is a real Natchitoches house. The interior is a gymnasium. Production designer Gene Callahan constructed the salon set entirely inside Northwestern State University's physical education building. The production used a gym floor as the foundation for what became one of the most warmly inhabited rooms in American cinema of that decade. Here is what makes it work. Callahan purchased real chairs and real fixtures from an actual local Natchitoches beauty salon to dress the set. The props were not fabricated to approximate salon equipment. They were salon equipment, pulled from a working business in the surrounding community and placed inside a gym. The salon feels lived in because the objects inside it were genuinely lived in. The warmth is real because the things carrying that warmth had a life before the cameras arrived. Cinematographer John A. Alonzo photographed a gym floor dressed with authentic materials, and the result reads as someone's beloved private world. The production's connection to Natchitoches ran deeper than any set though. Tom Skerritt ended up living inside the story in a way that nobody planned for, and that no art direction could have manufactured. Number 13. Drum Eatonton feels like a character who was observed rather than invented. He moves through the yard on Shelby's wedding morning with the specific energy of an ordinary Southern father who knows the day is significant and is not quite sure what to do with himself. Tom Skerritt, coming off Top Gun, brought something grounded and deeply specific to the role. There is a concrete reason for that. During production, Skerritt lived 2 houses from the real Bob Harling, Robert Harling's actual father. Harling has described the experience of watching his fake father and his real father simultaneously collecting storm debris from their respective yards. The proximity was unplanned. Producer Ray Stark and Herbert Ross had made a deliberate decision to have the cast live inside the actual Natchitoches neighborhood rather than commuting from hotel rooms. The intention was authenticity. Skerritt was measuring his performance against a living reference a short walk away, and Drum's behavior carries the weight of a role shaped by proximity to the actual man the character is drawn from. That is not something you can manufacture in rehearsal. It happened because a production company decided their cast should live in the real neighborhood, and the real neighborhood turned out to contain the real family. That closeness to the original story almost extended to the very top of the cast, including one role that a Hollywood legend personally lobbied to claim. Number 12. Shirley MacLaine as Weezer is one of the most precisely calibrated performances in the ensemble, but there is an alternate version of this film that exists only in a New York hotel room, and it was proposed by Bette Davis over tea. Davis contacted Harling and invited him to her hotel. She came fully prepared. She laid out a complete alternative cast, herself as Weezer, Elizabeth Taylor as Malin, and Katharine Hepburn as Clary. She presented it not as a casual idea, but as a serious creative proposition. On her way out, she reportedly told Harling, "You may give the role of Weiser to someone else, but you and they will hear from Bette Davis." Producer Ray Stark concluded that Louisiana's heat and the physical demands of the shooting schedule would be too punishing for Davis given her health at the time. The role went to MacLaine. Davis died approximately 1 month before the film's theatrical release in November 1989, which means she never saw who the role went to or what was made of it. The most famous alternative casting pitch in the film's history came from a woman who did not live to see the screen version. Every Weezer scene that MacLaine owns with such precision exists in the long shadow of that hotel room pitch. The youngest role in the ensemble had its own near-miss story, and it is one that changed 2 iconic films at exactly the same moment. Number 11. Julia Roberts as Shelby feels, in retrospect, like the only possible outcome. The performance that made her a movie star, the role that changed everything. But according to Robert Harling, Roberts was not the first choice. Meg Ryan was. Ryan was formally offered the role of Shelby. She turned it down because she had just been offered When Harry Met Sally and preferred the position of a true lead to a role within an ensemble of equally strong women. She chose the film where the story would center on her, rather than one where she would share the screen with 5 other compelling performances. Laura Dern and Winona Ryder were both on the short list after Ryan passed. Roberts entered the conversation when a casting director flagged her work in Mystic Pizza, a small film most people had not seen. Here is what that single casting decision produced. 2 of the most defining performances of the early 1990s exist in direct relationship with each other. Meg Ryan choosing When Harry Met Sally gave Steel Magnolias its star. One actress's preference for a lead role redirected 2 careers and shaped 2 films that audiences are still watching today. Every Shelby scene carries the residue of a decision made in a casting office that completely changed the trajectory of Hollywood's next decade. Roberts was not the only improbably cast actress in the ensemble. One of her co-stars had to disguise herself just to get in the room. All right, we're at the halfway mark and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 10, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite Steel Magnolias moment? Drop it in the comments. And if you're enjoying this, smash that like button and subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. Number 10. Annelle's entrance into Truvy's salon is one of the film's funniest arrivals. The big glasses, the teased hair, the stiff posture, the painful earnestness. The look is so specifically awkward that it reads like a character who spent considerable effort presenting herself this way. It turns out, the actress did exactly that, just not for the reasons anyone would expect. By Daryl Hannah's own account, in a 2024 Deadline interview, Herbert Ross initially refused to consider her for Annelle. She arrived at the audition having already styled her own hair, and done her own makeup, fully in character, and Ross reportedly did not recognize her when she walked in. Harling has recalled the story differently, saying Ross actively wanted Hannah for the role. The two accounts have lived in the record since. What is not disputed is that Hannah arrived transformed, and that the transformation worked. The most visually distinctive character in the film may owe her entire appearance to an actress who styled herself that way in a casting office before cameras rolled. Annelle's look, the glasses, and the teased hair that define her before she speaks a single word was assembled to navigate a director who had already said no. One Oscar winner had a very different method for managing Ross, and the timing of her leverage was impossible to argue with. Number 9. Clary Belcher, the elegant and mischievous widow who narrates the social weather of Chinquapin Parish, feels like a role designed specifically for Olympia Dukakis. She carries a particular authority on screen, warmly precise, quietly devastating, effortlessly the most informed person in any conversation. The casting of that role was settled not in a lengthy deliberation process, but by a television broadcast. Harling has recalled that during his first casting dinner with Herbert Ross, Dukakis won Best Supporting Actress for her performance in Moonstruck at the 60th Academy Awards. Ray Stark called the following morning and told Harling that Olympia was doing Clary. That was the entirety of the conversation. No further discussion followed. Harling had some initial concern about whether Dukakis could convincingly carry a southern accent. The Natchitoches locals who worked on the production during filming later told him that her accent was the most accurate of any cast members. The casting happened in a single phone call, timed to the most public professional validation an actress can receive. The part went to an Oscar winner before the ceremony was even fully processed. There was no audition, no screen test, no extended consideration, just Ray Stark, a telephone, and an Academy Award. That kind of institutional authority mattered on this particular set, because the director was running things with a degree of harshness that required someone with enough standing to shut it down. Number 8. The warmth between the 6 women in the salon scenes is one of the things audiences respond to most powerfully. It registers as genuine, effortless friendship built over years. What they are watching, in part, is the result of a real act of collective self-protection staged against the film's own director. Shirley MacLaine told the Garden and Gun Oral History in 2017 that Herbert Ross, who had trained as a ballet choreographer before moving into film, was cruel to Dolly Parton and Julia Roberts during production. MacLaine said that she eventually confronted him directly in front of everyone on set and told him in emphatic terms that the behavior needed to stop. She said that things improved after the confrontation. MacLaine had previously worked with Ross on The Turning Point in 1977. She understood his methods, and she understood when they had crossed a line. She used that history and the authority that came with it as leverage. The on-screen solidarity between the 6 women was produced in part by a genuine act of collective resistance. The veterans closed ranks around the younger cast members, and the friendship that reads so naturally in the salon scenes grew partly out of a shared experience of managing a difficult production environment. Parton's own response to Ross had already become legendary before MacLaine stepped in, and she had delivered it entirely on her own terms. Number 7. Truvy Jones moves through the salon like someone who has never had a moment of self-doubt. She is warm, unflappable, and certain. According to multiple cast recollections and Parton's 1994 autobiography, that characterization is not entirely a performance choice. It is Dolly Parton's actual posture toward the director, who questioned whether she belonged on the set. When Ross reportedly suggested that Parton should take acting lessons, she told him that she was not an actress. She was Dolly Parton, and that making her look like she was acting was his job as the director. That was her position, and she did not move from it. Parton also arrived as a complete self-contained creative unit. She brought her own hair, her own wigs, her own dedicated makeup artist, and a 3-ring binder of look continuity drawings she had prepared before production began. She was not waiting for the film to decide how she would appear on screen. She had already made those decisions and documented them. Every moment of Truvy's unshakable self-possession is drawn directly from the actress's behavior on set. The certainty you see on screen is the performance, and the performance is the person. There was nothing to separate them. The youngest member of the cast did not have that kind of professional standing or that kind of armor in place, and she needed someone with enough history in the industry to step in and provide it. Number 6. Malin Eatonton's love for Shelby is the emotional engine of the entire film. It is fierce, protective, and unconditional, and it registers on screen as something real even in the most heightened dramatic moments. Field told Vulture in 2024 that what audiences see between MacLaine and Shelby was being practiced in a sense every single day off camera. Field said that Ross went after Julia with a vengeance throughout production, and that the older actresses rallied around Roberts because she was the youngest and the least established member of the cast. When asked why Ross did not treat Field the same way, she answered, "Because he dared not." Shirley MacLaine has said that Roberts was at her house in tears nearly every night during the shoot. Field was actively absorbing pressure that was aimed at her co-star and working to redirect it away from someone who did not yet have the professional standing to deflect it on her own. The mother-daughter emotional core of the film was being mirrored off camera, on the same location, by the same two women. MacLaine's fierce protectiveness of Shelby was not a performance stretch. It was the same instinct Field was already running every day on set, directed at the same person. The bond that formed under those conditions mattered most when the cameras finally rolled on the sequence that the entire film was building toward. Number 5. MacLaine's breakdown in the cemetery is one of the great emotional performances in American film. I just want to hit something. I want to hit it hard. The scene has been studied and quoted and referenced for decades. The widespread story says it was captured in a single take. That is not accurate. Olympia Dukakis confirmed in interviews that the cemetery sequence took 3 full days to shoot in Louisiana heat. Sally Field performed the monologue at full emotional intensity on every single take, including all the coverage of her co-stars' reactions. The close-ups of Shirley MacLaine, Olympia Dukakis, and Dolly Parton that cut against Field's breakdown captured genuine real-time responses. They are watching Field actually screaming and weeping directly at them for hours across multiple days. Field has said the cemetery scene was the specific reason she accepted the role. Cinematographer John A. Alonzo was photographing real distress in real faces because the actress generating that distress was performing at complete capacity on every take in sustained summer heat, without holding anything back for the close-ups that were not hers. Those reaction shots are not staged. What reads as sympathetic listening is genuine lived experience of being in the same physical space as a performance that demanded everything from everyone present. That level of authenticity extended even further in the hospital sequence, into territory most audiences have never fully understood they were watching. Number 4. The hospital sequence in Steel Magnolias feels different from the rest of the film. Something about it is stiller and more specific, and it is difficult to fully account for why it carries the weight that it does. There is a reason. According to Harling, multiple members of the real medical team who treated his sister Susan Harling Robinson in Shreveport appear in the film's hospital scenes. Among them, Harling has said, is the nurse who was present in the room when Susan's life support was turned off in 1985. That person appears on screen, performing, in essence, what they actually did. Harling's mother, Margaret, the real MacLaine, insisted on being present on set for the filming of that sequence. She reportedly told her son that she would stay on location until Julia Roberts got up from the bed and walked away. This is not a dramatization of a real event. It is a near-documentary reenactment, performed in part by the actual participants from the original experience, witnessed off camera by the mother who lived it. The actress playing Susan is surrounded by the real people who were in that room. The real mother is watching from outside the frame. The scene does not feel like other scenes in the film because it is structured differently from them. None of any of it would exist without an impossible creative decision made in 10 days by one man running entirely on grief. Number 3. The armadillo groom's cake is the funniest thing in Steel Magnolias. The gray armadillo sliced open to reveal a blood-red velvet interior. One of the most replicated and quoted images the film produced. It lands as a perfectly timed, absurdist shock. It is also a piece of American food history that Harling regards as one of his most consequential contributions to the world. The red velvet armadillo references a real Southern groom's cake custom that predates the film. Harling has said in multiple interviews that helping restore red velvet cake to popular awareness is among his proudest achievements, and he has said it without any apparent irony. Red velvet cake had largely disappeared from mainstream American bakeries through the middle of the 20th century. In the years that followed Steel Magnolias, it returned to prominence across the country. The film is widely credited with driving that revival. Production designer Gene Callahan built the cake practically so that the cast reactions to the revealed interior would be unscripted on-camera responses, rather than performed ones. The surprise that registers on the actresses' faces when they see the red inside is real. They did not know exactly what they would find. The film's most visually absurd gag is simultaneously a cultural document, a piece of food history, and the probable cause of every red velvet item you have encountered in the last 35 years. Something else equally unexpected was developing between two cast members, while those cameras were still running. Number 2, Shelby and Jackson play as a young couple caught between love and consequence, and their ease together reads as natural and completely unforced. There is a production reason for at least some of that. What audiences interpret as screen chemistry was, in part, a real relationship forming during the same weeks the scenes were being filmed. Roberts arrived in Natchitoches in a relationship with Liam Neeson. By the end of the shoot, she was engaged to her on-screen husband Dylan McDermott, who had recently appeared in Hamburger Hill and was still in the early stages of his career. The engagement did not last. It ended within roughly a year of the film's November 1989 release. Roberts moved directly from Steel Magnolias to Pretty Woman, which transformed her from a promising newcomer into one of the biggest film stars on the planet. McDermott built a defining television career on The Practice. Both careers landed in places that could not have been predicted from the vantage point of that Louisiana summer. But during the shoot, two actors playing newlyweds were, at some point during production, falling in love with each other. The romantic ease between Shelby and Jackson was not purely a performance. It was at minimum informed by something real that was developing between the two people sharing those scenes. All of it traces back to a single decision made in 10 days by a man running entirely on grief. Number 1. The closing Easter egg hunt in Steel Magnolias is life coming back. Pink and gold, children running through a yard, the women finding something to hold on to after everything the film has put them through. It is one of the most carefully earned endings in American cinema, and it exists because a 2-year-old boy was starting to forget his mother. Susan Harling Robinson died on October 22, 1985, from complications following a kidney transplant at 33 years old. Her son Robert was approximately 2.5 years old at the time of her death. In the months afterward, he began calling his stepmother Mama. The memory of his real mother was already starting to dissolve. Playwright Michael Weller urged Harling to write something down. Harling has described the play pouring out in roughly 10 days. The only creative intention he has named was that Susan's son should someday understand who his mother was. Not to achieve catharsis, not to make art, to preserve one specific woman for one specific child who was too young to hold on to her himself. Years later, Harling's teenage nephew told him that his classmates thought he was lucky because Julia Roberts had played his mom. Every casting decision, every day in Louisiana heat, every confrontation on set, every frame of this film exists because a brother was afraid a small child would grow up without knowing a specific woman, and he had 10 days to do something about it. Steel Magnolias overcame a punishing director, impossible Louisiana heat, last-minute casting decisions, and a first-time screenwriter writing scenes that had actually happened to people he loved. Nearly every line audiences still quote arrived through an unplanned moment. A line scrawled on a palm, a disguise worn to an audition, a phone call the morning after an Oscar ceremony. The 6 women on screen built their warmth under genuine pressure. And the film reflects that solidarity because it was real. Every improbable choice accumulated into a result that outlasted all expectations. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments, like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie as much as you do. And as always, laughter through tears is my favorite emotion. We'll see you next time.